Good morning. Those of you who are joining us for the day, welcome. It is the last day of our Thanksgiving retreat. And traditionally, on the last day, we have a panel of question and answers. So I think I'm it, for better or worse. So I think we'll have a series of questions about your meditation, mindfulness, your practice, how to practice with this, practice with that, etc., etc. But first, I think I'd like to offer you a bit of some good news, and news that is not so good, perhaps. I'm not sure if it fits exactly in the bad news category. So we'll begin with the not so good news. I received an email from a friend of mine in Scotland, and they had said that Black Friday has expanded across the Atlantic to the UK. Now, I'm not sure how they do that because Black Friday depends upon a holiday. It's dependent upon Thanksgiving. So I don't know what the conditions are. But they have it with all the enthusiasm and rioting in the stores that we have here. On the lighter side, every year we have tofurkey for Thanksgiving. We are vegetarians, of course, and we prefer to see our turkeys wandering the grounds rather than sitting on a platter. And this year we had a little trouble finding enough tofurkeys. And the reason was, as the grocer put it, they were flying off the shelves. So the little tofurkeys sprouted tofurkey wings and flew away. And that is a good, even though it's a little difficult to find them, it's a good thing because that means more people are eating tofurkey, looking at alternatives to turkey. So I was very happy we had difficulty finding them, but we found enough. I think we found more than enough. We had, I think, 2 meals afterwards. We had some good American tradition, leftovers. Yes? So, I think before we open the questions and answers, I'd like to offer a little short talk. I've been reading the Shurangama Sutra, and in it, the Buddha asks Ananda, his attendant, "Where is your mind?" And the discourse continues throughout the book about the nature of the mind. But that begs the question, where is your mind? And that's one that, it's a very solid question. It's almost a koan in itself. Where is your mind? And that's a question we all need to ask ourselves as practitioners, right? That's why we're here. This is why we do what we do, to practice, to observe, to learn, to understand. And the important object is the mind. With the mind, we understand our world, or we have the potential to understand our world. With the mind, we create relationships. and context. We're beings of the mind, you might say. So, where is your mind? And as I was contemplating this, it has such a wide application, especially for mindfulness, because that's what mindfulness is about. Yeah. The application of awareness and attention on an object. Whether that object is our walking, sitting, standing, or lying down, the 4 positions. Where is our mind in all that? It was fascinating when people came, I think for the first day for the retreat or the second day, they were asking if they could use our internet and connect with our Wi-Fi. Now, can we use your internet? And I think the more apt question is, where is your mind? Yeah. That's a more apt question. I thought it was rather amusing, people come up and practice, and then, they want to automatically go on the internet and keep their busy life going. At the monastery, we kind of want to keep that busyness down because we're attending our minds. And where is our mind? So when we walk, you might ask yourself, where is your mind? Or when you're eating, where is your mind? Or are you thinking about, okay, is the bell going to be rung soon? Yeah. So I can talk to my neighbor sitting next to me. Not that these things are bad, but we're talking about practice here, and states of mind, and being able to subdue our busy mind. The mind is like a monkey in the tree, grasping from one object to another as it swings. And that's the nature of our mind, our basic everyday mind. Grasping this and that. Or it's like a runaway stallion, like an object. You grasp an object and take off with it. I think that's where we get some of our crazy ideas. The mind running away from itself. Has interesting potential. Or the mind is like a rampaging elephant. Pretty reckless, pretty strong, a little dangerous. So the nature of the mind, where is our mind? How do we learn about our mind? When we talk about the 4 Noble Truths, the basis of the Buddhist teachings, there is difficulty and suffering. This is the root cause. One of the root causes. Our minds are all over the place. Okay? And there's so many nuances on things that lead us away from a calm mind. We go through life every day. We get up, we go to work. If we live in a monastery, we go sit. We take care of the family, take care of ourselves, take care of careers. And we think our busy everyday life is our true selves. This is what I am. And the Buddha said, no, stop. Take another look. Calm the mind down. Take another look. And you'll see a different side of yourself. And we often refer to that as our true nature. We don't see our true nature because we have such a busy mind. We obscure the view of ourselves. and that connection with ourselves by our minds, our busy minds, or our misconceptions, misperceptions, because we lack clarity. So we practice to develop that clarity. And we develop that clarity by calming the mind. And the practice of samatha. And the samatha that leads to insight. That wisdom and understanding you develop through meditative practices, mindfulness practices. Because you're giving your mind a break. So, where is your mind? And when you get ready to go Christmas shopping, ask yourself, oh, where's my mind? Yeah, very important, very important. So I thought I'd open up for questions. And I could use some help with someone writing. Yeah, please. Could you write on the board of questions? Yeah, thanks. And we have a couple microphones that could be passed around. There's right behind you.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, I have a sort of difficult question, and I'm not sure exactly it's appropriate, but I think it sort of is, so I'll just ask it and then you can do as you will. I'm encouraging someone to come to Blue Cliff for a few days, someone who is really, really depressed. Not depressed to the level of being dangerous to the Sangha or disruptive or anything, but just very, very, very depressed. And my experience is that I have been depressed over the years when I've practiced, and the Sangha has been of great benefit to me. But I've also experienced when I have been on retreat, or even just for days of mindfulness, on days when I'm feeling particularly vulnerable, it has felt so lonely to be here, partly because there's so much spaciousness and not attention, which is nice, but is also really hard sometimes. And so my feeling is I want to try and establish a little bit of support for this person when he comes, to say, this is my friend, and he could use a little extra love and attention, and he won't ask for it. But then again, I don't want to burden the brothers and sisters or lay members, long-term lay members. So it's a question in my mind I've been asking. And I think it's a kind of, well, anyway, it's a question that's in my mind.
How to facilitate that, even if it's... if it's even possible.
Right, and in the most respectful way possible, because I do understand something about the challenges of being a resident in a community with a lot of people coming and going.
Yeah.
So that mixture, but then I also recognize that it's sometimes very easy to reach out to someone if we just know they would want it. So we need the information. So that's my sort of conundrum at the moment.
Your koan.
My koan. Thank you.
That's a pretty good one.
Thanks.
Is there another question? I might take a couple before I answer. Okay. Oh, okay. Don't worry, I remember that one. Yeah. Okay. Okay. In the blue, in the back. It's even though there's a lot of sound going on, it's directed that way. And even sometimes I have difficulty hearing if you're on this side of the speaker. Yes?
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, my question is about when looking deeply and encountering some core beliefs about ourselves or the world or other beings, how to work with that.
How to what?
How to work with that. So let's say I see that, a belief I hold about myself is that I'm all alone, I'm not lovable, or the world is a scary place. Those deep-seated beliefs.
Ones, the negative ones.
Right, how to work with that. Once I have become aware that this is a driving, message in me.
These are two very related questions, I think, dealing with depression. That we see that more here at the monastery. John Kabat-Zinn puts out a very good book, Working Through Depression. Depression is a very interesting phenomena in that it keeps us in the wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering, because we cannot, for one reason or another, break out of a mode of thinking. For people who suffer depression, their thoughts tend to gravitate towards the negative things. Everything looks negative. It creates this negative view of oneself in the world. That's why you find, like, for example, people who kill themselves, people with depression, who kill them, like Robin Williams, because it creates this cycle, this endless cycle of negativity. And that is what they work with. When you go to a psychotherapist, that's part of their therapy. And of course, there's different degrees. I mean, there's a difference between, okay, I'm feeling a little depressed today. That's pretty natural. That in itself is a very challenging thing, because we don't want to be around our own negativity. We shy away from difficult things, and we grasp at the things that we see are good. And that creates a big difficulty, because if we're always chasing after things that are good, one, you're like a dog chasing your tail. One. Two, you're saying you're a bad person. I got to get away from this. We have this judgment. Okay, these negative things are bad. Okay, the happy stuff is good. So we're trying to run away from ourselves in some respect. So that cycle that cycle. The human mind, according to the scientists, has a mental event the average person has 60,000 mental events a day. Okay. There's a lot of activity going on with the mind. So, practicing with depression, practicing with these constant negative thoughts. And you can have a lot of negative thoughts and not be depressed or have depression. That just might be the conditioning in your life. Maybe growing up with difficulties. Having parents who are negative. So somewhere along the line, we develop these continual thoughts of negativity, where our views are colored. It's like, the idea of rose-colored glasses, right? We see things always really wonderful and beautiful. Well, the depression glasses are a little darker, and so we always see things the negative way, right? And we have to accept ourselves, right? In meditation, in the practice, and just as a human being, to be a whole human being is to accept all aspects of ourselves, even the difficult aspects. I'm not always such a wonderful person. I have a negative side to me. I can be a jerk. I can be insensitive. But we have to accept these things and own these things as part of this package of being human. Just as we have to accept, hey, I'm an all right kind of guy. We're okay because we don't have to define ourselves by our negativity. We don't have to define ourselves by the unwholesome aspects that come up in the mind. Right? Out of those 60,000 thoughts you might have, or mental events, could be emotional, mental. Which one of those are true? Yeah. Which of those are true? I have a negative thought of, oh man, I'm a real loser. Okay. An hour later, wow, life is wonderful. Yeah. So which one of those are true? Yeah. So you have to kind of work with what's coming up with the mind. And in sitting meditation, we observe, right? And we can observe that some of these things are positive. We can observe some of these things are negative, and have a non-discriminative view. Meaning a thought is a thought is a thought is a thought. We put that idea of it's a good thought, it's a bad thought, it's a happy thought, it's an insightful thought. We put that value on that experience of that thought and that emotion. And by doing that, we grasp it. And then our ego, or manas, vijnana, creates that identity of I. I am that depression. I am that negativity. That feeds back into your consciousness. Yeah. What we think, what we say, what we do, how we view things, what we choose, how we choose, that all comes back into our consciousness. And if it's negative, unwholesome things, it reinforces the negative and unwholesome things by creating seeds. Maybe not right away, but eventually it'll come out. Just as when we attend to the positive things in life and develop a positive view of things, when we think in those terms, that itself reinforces my mental states in a positive way. So in depression, people are feeding themselves, you might say, negativity by creating negativity in their minds. And not that it's purposefully done. Of course not. It's all subconsciously done. Because we have that substrata that exists of the mind. So dealing with negative thoughts, one, we have to have a radical acceptance of whatever it is. Yeah. A real acceptance, meaning I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this negative thought, this negative feeling. Then we have to, bring in a little insight here of our practice of impermanence. This is just a thought today. What's it going to be like tomorrow? Right? Or an hour from now? So seeing these things, accepting these things, knowing that these are impermanent, and that there's change, because it's impermanent, there's change. And we have the capacity through our practice to make those transformations. Now, in terms of people coming to visit the monastery, we get more and more people as we become more and more recognized. More and more people come up with situations. And it is a challenge, depending upon the degree of difficulty. We've had people have psychotic breaks here. We've had to have people taken away by the authorities because we don't have the capacity to be basically sort of like a psychiatric ward. We're just monks and nuns practicing. But on the other hand, we do care about people, and we do care about transformation and helping people transform. If someone comes up with a friend, that's wonderful. That's the best you can do, really. Helping bring someone up and being with them. I would suggest outside a retreat, like a general stay, when it's not as active. And just, introduce them around. And, if you feel okay with it, and you've gone through that experience, I think you could trust yourself on that in this case. We never know what will happen, but we always hopefully hope for the best. I give it a shot. We have a sound at the bell. Question?
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, so I have, I think, a follow-up question to the previous one, perhaps. And it is, I'm having difficulty in, I feel stuck in trying to discern what part within me is my ego and what is my true self, true nature. And the two seem to be mixed up many times. And that leads sometimes me looking back and really hating myself for having made decisions or having reacted or responded in ways that I should not have because I knew better. And so I feel always caught in not being, not knowing whether it's my ego running the show, driving me crazy, or not. And so if you could just shed some light, thank you.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Rocio, and my question is related to, I think I'm too close, to men and women. I would like to know how do you perceive men and women in an equal way? And what would be your advice to teach my children? I have 3 young daughters. To perceive that men and women are equal in this world. Because we are, but in reality, in society, men are powerful. So you get caught in that belief. And for many years, I had that idea without knowing it. So I would like to see what are your thoughts about it, how this practice could be useful in that regard.
Interesting question.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Okay, one more for right now.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, I guess my question is about Thai, and you may have talked about it during the retreat, I don't know, but I guess the question is, to bring it back to practice, how will Thai's embodied impermanence affect practice? For me, Thai's been an anchor, I think, in so many ways, his being, certainly his teaching, his community, the miracle that he came will continue, but his very being was part of sort of an anchor in my practice, and so I'm wondering, any thoughts about that?
What's next?
Yeah.
It's a big question. Okay. Our ego develops, manifests unconsciously, of course. And it's usually very self-serving because it's involved with the survival mechanism. And when we talk about the fight or flight or freeze response in animals, human beings have that as well. So it's very self-serving, self-protective. Everything revolves around the self. And so being from the unconscious, we don't always see it. That's why it sneaks up on you, and then you thought, oh, what did I do? Yeah? So our practice of mindfulness is constantly trying to be aware of what's coming up in the mind. And when you do that more, you begin to see the subtleties and the nuances. And you can become more aware of things that are connected with the ego. Like you said, you reflect and you thought, wow, that was kind of egotistic, or that decision probably wasn't my best, right? Yeah. Well, it's good, in one hand, that you have that capacity to reflect and learn. So you might take a look at what was my mind state in that. How much mindful energy am I applying to looking at these things? But don't get caught up in too much regret. Yeah, we're all students. We're all learning. We all stub our toes, and we all do dumb things. I know I do. So not too much regret, just a little to make you reflect and think, oh, okay, well next time I know better. Next time I can change the peg. So it's really becoming familiar with your patterns of thinking. It's the same way with the depression, the question of the depressions. Just by being more familiar, willing to accept, and not too much regret, or else that's a hindrance in itself. These agitated mental states are a hindrance to our balance and our mental well-being, and it obscures the true self. The true self is very clear, very lucid, rather open and spacious and inclusive. There's a wisdom embodied in that we can access. There's lack of fear, a want of well-being. So look at your motives, and that tells you where that mental state is coming from, or those mental events are coming from. Yeah. How do I perceive male, female energies, especially how do the children, right? I don't know about most of you, but in my family, it was my mother who ruled the roost. And she was a very strong image in my life, a very positive, strong image in my life. She really took care of the family. This is a very interesting question, because living in a community growing up with two sisters and my mother, and living in a community, a nuns community right across the street where we connect a great deal. Traditionally, in Buddhist traditions, monks and nuns are very separated. It's an interesting event, first of all. On one level, we're very different beings. Yeah, very different beings. If you talk to the brothers about decisions the sisters made, or how they made it, they kind of scratch their head. What are they talking? What are they doing? Why did they decide that? And I'm sure it's the same way on the sister's side about the brothers. Yeah. There was a book out a long time ago, Men Are for Mars, Women Are for Venus, something very different. And yeah, I'd say so. But on the other hand, we share a great similarity, that we're all Buddhas to be. Yeah. On the conventional side, yeah, we see the differences, of course. But on another level, not so much. Not so much. Because we all have this human capacity, the capacity to be a human being. And in a group of practitioners, we're all striving to practice and to transform. And there's a lot of commonality there. Okay. We often read a short discourse before chanting, getting beyond the superior, the inferior, or the equality complexes. You see someone as inferior, someone superior, or equal. Are you my equal? Are you my inferior? Are you my superior? The practice is to get beyond concepts, really to understand our Bodhi nature. You have to understand a non-dualistic view, getting beyond differences, getting beyond similarities, getting beyond equality, because these are just ideas. In the final analysis, we just are. Now, what does that have to do with, that's wonderful when we're talking about the spiritual nature of the person. Then there are the realities of the conventional world where you have to go out and live and support and deal with jerky male bosses. And I've met some jerky women bosses in my time. And that's where our practice takes us. We bring these issues, because it most definitely is an issue. Women are paid less. Women have less respect. There's certainly, how many CEOs are there? All across the societal boundaries, throughout the world. It's very interesting that you're asking me this question, who's a guy. Yeah. As I've said, I grew up with very strong women who don't take oppression well, who don't take being slighted well. And so I do appreciate people who, especially women, who do speak up and bring this to the forefront of our society, looking at the societal challenges that we have. But can we do that? The question is, how do we do that mindfully? How do we do that, incorporate that practice of social change in our lives without getting carried away emotionally? Because it's a very deep topic. It's a very deep topic. So that's each of our koan. How do I take this practice and bring it into these social issues? And it's just not gender equality. There's racial equality. There's economic equality. There's all so many social issues. And that's a question each one of us has to explore. We have to explore. This is our practice. How can I better society without trying to destroy it first? And destroy myself in the process, that spiritual being. That's what's important. And if I was going to transmit something like that to my grandchildren, imaginative grandchildren, I don't have any grandchildren or children, for some reason, I would teach them the practice first. how to approach these difficulties. It's not so much that I have an answer. I don't have an answer. But I have questions. That's each of us has to look at our own practice, our own consciousness. Touching our true nature, being with that true nature. How do I develop and extend that into society, into my family, into the community, into society in general? That's the big question. So the big Thai question. Yeah. I have some questions. What's your name? Your name? Brad. Okay, Brad. Do you practice now? Okay. And where is Thai? Yeah. Physically, he's on the other side of the Atlantic. Our physical form does not make up the totality of who we are. Yeah, we assume it does. These are the part of the skandhas, the grasping skandhas. Let me say that again. Our physical form is not the totality of our identity, of who we are, of what we are. The form is just an aspect of it. At Plum Village, that's where Thai resides. That's where he gives Dharma talks. Thai comes to the east, or comes to the monastery over here every 2 years. So he's not here, physically. But yet we still practice. Yet we still want to practice. We all have our inspiration for practice and our motivation for practice. Even though Thai is not here physically at Blue Cliff. So what will happen when Thai passes? Well, my bet is we're going to get up at 5:30 in the morning to go sit at 6 o'clock. And then have exercise period, and then mindful breakfast, and then. Yeah. I think that's what'll happen. Okay, maybe one or two more questions, if they're around. No? Enough? Oh, one more. There's a sir right behind you, right behind you. He's sneaking up on you.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, could you suggest ways that in our practice we can actively cultivate the continuation body of our ancestors and our loved ones who have passed?
Yes. Another question? Two more in the back.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, I've been experimenting with focusing on my breath in a different way, which has been experiencing the cycle with the exhale and then letting the inhale happen. And it seems so freeing and so different. So now I'm feeling a little disoriented to hear all the gathas that I've heard for a few decades that all begin with breathing in. I do this, breathing out, I smile. So it's left me approaching the whole question of how do I feel when I seem to be different than my whole Sangha?
Good question.
Thank you.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, I recently read an article about the tension between Buddhism and MSBR, mindfulness, stress-based reduction. And I posted the article on a Facebook page, and I immediately heard from two Sangha members that said, well, I just completed the 8-week course, and another one who said, this is my second time with the 8-week course. And I recall a Dharma talk from Sister Deng Yem a couple months ago, saying that the difference for us is that in MSBR there's no teaching of emptiness or 5 mindfulness trainings or teaching of impermanence. So I guess my question is, does MSBR have something to teach us?
Okay. Why don't we take these 3 questions? Okay. Our ancestors, the practice of our ancestors, being with our ancestors. It's a very interesting thing. I didn't quite get it when they talked about, when Thai talks about, practicing being with our ancestors. Because I had always felt that, well, yeah, they're a part of me. I've always sort of taken that for granted. So the idea of practicing for that was a bit new for me. When for example, like I said, my mother was a strong figure in my life. So she's just here. She's just with all my other ancestors. I think that's the reality. I think that's the truth of the matter and the real analysis of life. That, yeah, I'm part of my ancestors. My ancestors are part of me, and they're here. That's just the nature of life. But for actual practices, we bring the ideas, or we bring the thoughts of your ancestors, up in our consciousness, because not everyone is consciousness of it. So we practice with gathas, or we practice with visualizations, sitting down, visualizing my mother or visualizing my father. During Thanksgiving, my ancestors on my father's side were Puritans, so with the tall, funky hats with the buckle, the silly school stuff you learn. So I visualized my ancestors, doing that way back when, which is kind of funny, but it's okay. I tend to think, Puritans being rather extremist in their religious views, were probably rolling over in their graves knowing that one of their ancestors was a Buddhist monk. But I have hopes they'll get over it. Yes. So it's bringing to consciousness, ways of bringing to consciousness of your ancestors. Really, that's the fundamental practice in various different ways. You might have pictures that remind you of them, or in your meditations, you can visualize them or bring them up, or going for a walk during walking meditation. Go for a walk with one of your ancestors, your mom or your grandfather or whoever. So it's just a practice of bringing these up to consciousness and being with that. Yeah. That's the pivotal. That's the real pivotal idea of it. The second question that we missed, who had that one? Yeah. Oh, the breath. Right, the breath. In and out breath. Right. When I come in the morning to do sitting meditation, I don't always go to my breath. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell Todd. I don't always go to my breath. Quite often I just go to my body and observe my whole body. If I start with my breath, that generally leads me to the breath body, the whole body. If that's the type of meditation I'm doing. These are practices, not precepts. So, if my mind's very agitated when I come into the meditation hall, then I really follow my breath to calm my mind down, to develop the concentration that's needed for meditation. It's called preparatory concentration, preparing yourself for meditation. And there's different degrees of concentration. But we all have our individual practices and our communal practices, right? So when I'm in a community setting, I use my communal practices, but I also have my individual practices, and those are legitimate too, because the important aspect of practice is to transform. And if you're doing exactly the same thing you're doing today that you did a year ago or 2 years ago, that's an obstruction. The practice is fluid and it changes throughout our lives. Eventually we throw things away because we don't need them anymore. That's the nature of practice. We have to understand, not only are we a collective, but we're also individuals. We're individuals of a collective. And we have to look at it that way. We all have little differences. And all those little differences are just as valid as our communal interbeing self. They're actually one and the same. So when I'm with community, I practice communally. Especially with sitting meditation, I have my own route. Because I've been doing it for a while, and this changes. And what I really have, after 12 years, 13, 14 years of sitting, am I going to still practice like someone who just begun? Yeah, no. It changes. It's fluid. So think in terms of communal practice and individual practice. Yeah, when I'm with community, I practice in that way. Okay? Mindfulness base, stress reduction. Right. Sure, there's value in it. Of course, yeah. The difference between Buddhism and the practice of MBSR, I never get those right. MBSR. They take a secular psychological approach, which is a valid approach, of course. Psychology by nature has a different goal than the goal in Buddhism. Its goal is to bring a person to well-being, of being able to function in society. They're looking for functionality, of being normal, more or less, although they don't use that word anymore. But an acceptable way of life in society. That's the function of psychology. The function of Buddhism is transcendence. That's a whole different game. So it speaks to things on a spiritual level, on an ultimate level, that the secular uses of mindfulness don't. That's the main difference. They're looking for a person to adjust to society and a feeling of well-being. We want to be Buddhas. We want to be enlightened. We want to be great bodhisattvas. Different. Different goal. So that's why you don't hear emptiness or precepts, etc., in the MBSR or other related psychological-based mindfulness practices. Different goals. But they're equally, they're good. In Buddhism, one of the main differences is that the precepts is the beginning of the path of meditation and mindfulness. To begin the path, you have to have the precepts. In Buddhism, mindfulness without precepts isn't right mindfulness. So it definitely has a moral, ethical base to it. Not to say that MBSR doesn't, but again, we have different goals. So I think I'll wrap this up, and thank you for being here. And you're very important questions, very deep questions. And we'll end with 3 sounds of the bell.